Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be making Edikaikong soup. Edikaikong soup is a soup from Nigeria, specifically from Akwa, Ibom and Calabar. For today's soup, the ingredients you will need are your washed and chopped Ugwu leaves. You would also need water leaves. Today I'll be using frozen, so I've thawed it and I have washed thoroughly. You would also need some dried fish. I'm just using catfish today, dried catfish. You would need some crayfish or dried prawns. You will need palm oil. Palm oil usually comes in liquid form, but it's a bit thick because it's quite cold. And you will need your salt. Now you want to boil in your protein. You want to boil your protein. Today I'll be using goat meat. So I'm just going to go ahead and salt it. And at this point you can add whatever seasoning cube you want to use or whatever seasoning you want to use. Today I'll just be using salt. I use just salt in most of my cooking. I'll put in a Scotch bonnet and that will melt as it cooks so I don't have to chop it. I would also chop in an onion. I'll add in my stockfish. I pre-soaked it in hot water before throwing it into the meat. But you don't have to do that if you're using this method. But if you're just going to throw it into your soup at a later time, you want to make sure you soak it in boiling water. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cook my meat. While cooking, I added some smoked turkey. Then I'm just going to check to make sure it's tender. At this point, it's not yet cooked, so I'm just going to cover it back to make sure it cooks through properly. You want to make sure your meat is very tender in this soup. So just going to cover it back and allow it to steam some more. Now it's been cooking for a while now. I have a mix of Scotch bonnet, onion and garlic, and I'm just going to blend it into a paste like this. I'm going to add that later on in the cooking process. Now I'm just going to check for meat. It's been cooking for about 10 minutes now, and now I can see that the meat is nice and tender. And you don't want the water to be too much in the meat as well, because this soup is oil based and not water based. So I started cooking with some water, but I've allowed it to dry now. I'm just checking out to see if the stock is not too much. You can see it's very reduced, and that's just the right time for me to go in with my dried fish. And this is dried catfish, like I said, so it's quite chunky. This crayfish is quite small in size, so I do not have to blend it. Just gonna stir that to incorporate. Now I'm going to add in our water leaf. If you're using fresh water leaf, it's basically the same process. So you just want to add that in and let it steam for a while. You stir it and let it steam for a while. And water leaf it releases a lot of water. So if you're using the natural one, you want to be extra careful not to have too much water in the meat when you put that. I'm using frozen, but still it's still gonna release some water. You stir properly. Then you cover to steam. Now I'm just going to add in the blended pepper, garlic and onions into the soup base, and this just adds a little extra flavor for me. You stir properly. Again, with this soup, you want to make sure you're stirring a lot because you want every flavor to be properly incorporated. Now you cover again to steam. Now the water leaf has been steaming for about 6 minutes. I'm just going to pour in my washed and chopped Ugwu leaves. And then you're going to stir properly again. With this soup, you want to make sure you use a wide pot so that it's easier for you to stir properly, because you thoroughly need to stir to achieve a nice flavor. Now we're going to add in our palm oil. Remember, I said this soup is palm oil based and not water based, hence the quantity of the palm oil for this pot of soup. But that's what makes all the difference in Edikaikong soup. Again, you want to make sure you stir properly. I'm happy with that. I'm going to cover again now to steam for a couple of minutes. At this point, I'm just going to check and then add in my own secret ingredient, which is just a pepper soup blend. I like the flavor in this soup. Usually when it's fresh water leaf, it releases a lot more water than frozen. So I'm going to be cooking a bit longer, steaming a bit longer in this case, just to encourage it to release some more fluid. It's not quite ready at this point. It's looking good, but it's not quite ready. So I'm going to cover it and steam it for a bit longer, just to encourage that frozen water leaf to release some more fluid. Even though it's not water-based, it still has to have, some moist, not watery, but just a bit of moist to make it nice and flavorful. I'm just going to taste for salt, and it's already tasting delicious. But just to take it to another level, to a whole new level, we're just going to cover it up and allow it to steam for about 5 more minutes. I can already smell it. Now I've opened the pot and it's just, it smells so awesome. This soup is such a good soup, and you can already see that it's moist and lovely, and that oil has coated the veggies. Now our soup is ready. I'm just gonna put that aside, and I'm gonna make some ground rice to go with this. You can have this with eba, with any swallow fufu, but I'm just gonna have it with ground rice today. And ground rice is just powdered rice, and I'm just gonna make it in water. So I'm gonna start with a pot of cold water. You can see that the soup is looking so lovely with a lot of protein in it. So I started boiling the water for the ground rice. Most times I make my ground rice with cold water. I start with cold water and then I boil it, but today I've boiled the water and I've started turning the ground rice, and all you just have to do is twist and pull towards you. So twist and pull until you achieve your desired consistency. And with ground rice, I usually flavor with a little bit of salt because it can be quite bland if you don't put in salt. So I'm going to put in some salt, as you will see soon. So you add more water to achieve your desired texture. I've just added some salt, as you see. So I've got to keep twisting and turning until it's ready. Now it's ready. I'm just going to grab a ladle and serve in my plate, just as you would see in most African homes. So you just scoop it, put it in your plate, and use your hand to mold it into a nice smooth shape, and then you serve your soup just like so, and you enjoy it. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, subscribe, and stay tuned for more lovely delicacies from across the world, most especially Africa. Thank you and goodbye.